Tried to make this every other way, they wouldn't let me. Had to go live.
I hereby declare this to be an unlawful assembly. I order all those assembled to immediately disperse.
And it's the only thing that it's all about, nothing else.
The old way is in the certain process of destruction, and a new world order is beating down the door.
Okay, this is what every single time Race for control about a minute.
Is where you think you're free when you're being fundamentally manipulated and dictated. One form of dictatorship is being in a prison cell and you can see the bars and touch it. The other one is sitting in a prison cell but you can't see the bar, you think you're free. What the human race is suffering from is mass hypnosis. We are being hypnotized.
He stops with great derision at the idea of the existence.
It's about to freeze it all out.
Technology of mass mind control.
It'll freeze it every time right here.
And government.
Oh, live feed didn't let it. Nice.
Modern man believes.
Go back to the beginning. Watch from the beginning, people.
To believe anything is superstitious.
Nice.
But the truth is, modern man, ladies and gentlemen, is the ideal hypnotic subject. Puffed up on the idea that he is the crown of creation. He vehemently denies the power of the hypnotist's control over him, even as his head bobs up and down on the string. Anyone who believes what anyone else writes or says without thoroughly researching it and making sure that it is absolutely true is a puppet on a string. And when the puppet master calls the tune, he will dance. What we observe in the population today are the three destructive symptoms of persons whose minds are controlled by alien forces, and I do not mean from Mars. These forces are amnesia, in effect loss of memory. The second is abulia, or loss of will. The third is apathy, loss of interest in events vital to one's own health and survival. Amnesia, abulia, and apathy are nearly universal among us today and gaining a greater foothold with every passing day.
Oh, don't try it. Oh, come on.
We are not professing to tell you the complete story of these activities. We are professing to tell you the complete story that we know. But these records that we've uncovered don't tell the story. They tell pieces of it.
I'm Christy Nicola, born July of 1962, rendering me 32 years of age. I was a subject in radiation as well as mind control and drug experiments performed by a man I knew as Dr. Green. My parents were divorced around 1966, and Donald Richard Ebner, my natural father, was involved with Dr. Green in the experiments. I was a subject from 1966 to 1976. Dr. Green performed radiation experiments on me in 1970, focusing on my neck, throat, and chest, 1972 focusing on my chest and my uterus in 1975. Each time I became dizzy, nauseous, and threw up. All these experiments were performed on me in conjunction with mind control techniques and drugs in Tucson, Arizona. Dr. Green was using me mostly as a mind control subject from 1966 to 1973. His objective was to gain control of my mind and train me to be a spy assassin. The first significant memory took place at Kansas City University in 1966. Don Ebner took me there by plane when my mom was out of town. I was in what looked like a laboratory, and there seemed to be other children. I was strapped down, naked, spread eagle, on a table, on my back. Dr. Green had electrodes on my body, including my head. He used what looked like an overhead projector and repeatedly said he was burning different images into my brain while a red light flashed aimed at my forehead. In between each sequence, he used electric shock on my body and told me to go deeper and deeper, while repeating each image would go deeper into my brain, and I would do whatever he told me to do. I felt drugged because he had given me a shot before he started the procedure. When it was over, he gave me another shot. The next thing I remember, I was with my grandparents again in Tucson, Arizona. I was 4 years old. You can see from this experiment that Dr. Green used trauma, drugs, post-hypnotic suggestion, and more trauma in an effort to gain total control of my mind. He used me in radiation experiments both for the purposes of determining the effects of radiation on various parts of my body and to terrorize me as an additional trauma in the mind control experiments. The rest of the experiments took place in Tucson, Arizona, out in the desert. I was taught how to pick locks, be secretive, use my photographic memory, and a technique to withhold information by repeating numbers to myself. Dr. Green moved on to wanting me to kill dolls that looked like real children. I stabbed a doll with a spear once after being severely traumatized, but the next time I refused. He used many pain induction techniques, but as I got older, I resisted more and more. He often tied me down in a cage, which was near his office.
Please pay attention to this. I've tried to make this video more than
he and his assistants were sometimes careless and left the cage unlocked. Whenever physically possible, I snuck into his office and found files with reports and memos addressed to CIA and military personnel. Included in these files were project, subproject, subject, and experiment names with some code numbers for radiation
if this is
and mind
bullshit,
control experiments,
why is this so hard for me to put this video out?
in your written documentation.
Had to literally go live.
I was caught twice, and Dr. Green ruthlessly used electric shock, drugs, spun me on a table, put shots in my stomach, in my back, dislocated my joints, and hypnotic techniques to make me feel crazy and suicidal. Because of my rebellion and growing lack of cooperation, they gave up on me as a spy assassin. Consequently, the last 2 years, 1974 to 1976, Dr. Green used various mind control techniques to reverse the spy assassin messages to self-destruct and death messages.
Why is nobody laughing? Imagine that, because these
dead,
people actually...
And I struggled to stay alive all of my adult life. I believe it is by the grace of God that I am still alive. These horrible experiments have profoundly affected my life. I developed multiple personality disorder because Dr. Green's goal was to split my mind into as many parts as possible so he could control me totally. He failed. But I've had to endure years of constant physical, mental, and emotional pain, even to this day. I've been in therapy consistently for 12 years, and it wasn't until I found my current therapist 2.5 years ago, who had knowledge of the mind control experiments, that I've finally been able to make real progress and begin to heal. In closing, I ask that you keep in mind that the memories I've described are but a glimpse of the countless others that took place over the 10 years between 1966 and 1976. That they weren't just radiation, but mind control and drug experiments as well. I have included more detailed information of what I remember in your written documentation. Please help us by recommending an investigation and making the information available so that therapists and other mental health professionals can help more people like myself. I know I can get better. I am getting better. And I know others can too, with the proper help. Please help us in an effort to prevent these heinous acts from continuing in the future. Thank you very much.
If there's 1% chance this could be true, this needs to be
Hello
looked
world,
at.
we are anonymous. The following video is information. How it is we have so much information, but know so little. Learning is experience. Everything else is just information. We were keeping our eye on 1984. When the year came and the prophecy didn't, thoughtful Americans sang softly in praise of themselves. The roots of liberal democracy had held. Wherever else the terror had happened, we, at least, had not been visited by Orwellian nightmares. But we had forgotten that alongside Orwell's dark vision, there was another, slightly older, slightly less well-known, equally chilling, Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. Contrary to common belief even among the educated, Huxley and Orwell did not prophesy the same thing.
Share this,
Orwell
please.
warns that we will be overcome by an externally imposed oppression. But in Huxley's vision, no big brother is required to deprive people
We're in
of their
Huxley's
autonomy,
vision.
maturity,
Trust me.
and history. As he saw it, people will come to love their oppression, to adore the technologies that undo their capacities to think. What Orwell feared were those who would ban books. What Huxley feared was that there would be no reason to ban a book, for there would be no one who wanted to read one. Orwell feared those who would deprive us of information. Huxley feared those who would give us so much that we would be reduced to passivity and egoism. Orwell feared that the truth would be concealed from us. Huxley feared the truth would be drowned in a sea of irrelevance.
Yes.
Orwell feared we would become a captive culture. Huxley feared we would become a trivial culture, preoccupied with some equivalent of the feelies, the orgy porgy, and the centrifugal bumble puppy. As Huxley remarked in Brave New World Revisited, the civil libertarians and rationalists who are ever on the alert to oppose tyranny failed to take into account man's almost infinite appetite for distractions. In 1984, Orwell added, "People are controlled by inflicting pain." In Brave New World, they are controlled by inflicting pleasure. In short, Orwell feared that what we fear will ruin us. Huxley feared that what we desire will ruin us. If you haven't heard of MK Ultra, Project
You're
MK
blind.
Ultra, Artichoke and Bluebird were administratively rolled over into MK Ultra, which was created by the CIA on April 3, 1953. MK Ultra was in turn rolled over into MK Search on June 7, 1964. MK Search then ran until June 1972, at which time extensive shredding of MK Ultra and MK Search files was ordered by the director of the CIA, Richard Helms. The surviving MK Ultra documents can be obtained from the CIA under the Freedom of Information Act. There was a round of declassification of mind control documents in the 1970s which were the foundation of books published in the 1970s and 1980s. A document entitled, Hypnotic Experimentation and Research, February 10, 1954 describes a simulation experiment of relevance to the creation of Manchurian candidate assassins. The unknown female was then instructed, having previously expressed a fear of firearms, that she would use every method at her disposal to awaken the unknown female, now in a deep hypnotic sleep, and failing this, she would pick up a pistol nearby and fire it at the unknown female. She was instructed that her rage would be so great that she would not hesitate to kill the unknown female for failing to awaken. The unknown female carried out these suggestions to the letter, including firing the unloaded gun at the unknown female and then proceeding to fall into a deep sleep. After proper suggestions were made, both were awakened and expressed complete amnesia for the entire sequence. The unknown female was again handed the gun, which she refused, in an awakened state, to pick up or accept from the operator. She expressed absolute denial that the foregoing sequence had happened. MK Ultra was divided into 149 sub-projects. One group of sub-projects involved the development and testing of mind control drugs. The goal was to identify compounds which would assist in interrogation and in the creation of amnesia. The CIA sponsored LSD research through MK Ultra. It also financed LSD conferences and books. An undated document entitled D-lysergic acid diethylamide, LDS-25, states some of the more outstanding effects are the mental confusion, helplessness, and extreme anxiety which are produced by minute doses of this substance. Based upon these reactions, its potential use in offensive psychological warfare and in interrogation is considerable. It may become one of the most important psychochemical agents. Unethical practice by physicians and the direct involvement of pharmaceutical companies are part of the history of hallucinogens. Under top-secret clearance, Eli Lilly Company was given a $400,000 grant in 1953 to manufacture and supply LSD to the CIA Army. LSD research was ongoing in 1977 when LSD was a controlled substance.
The wrong way.
After a few minutes, the men found it difficult to obey orders, and soon the results were chaotic.
Yeah, you ever done acid or shrooms before? You can see how quickly this would just go into fucking chaos. It isn't funny, but no, I mean, imagine they put this in your tap water slowly.
Was now given command of the squad. He too had received LSD, and he no longer was an effective leader.
Oh shit, no, that's a good idea, yeah.
When an officer ordered the leader to drill the squad, he responded with, "You want them drilled? You drill them."
Dude.
Ordered to leave the field, he refused to go.
See, can you imagine if slowly they freaking did this to us?
In answer to a direct question,
Or just
he said he was capable capable of
real
doing
quick
it,
at once.
and was instructed to do so. Minutes later, it was evident that he was unable to carry out his orders, and he was escorted from the field. We have seen some of the effects of LSD. What effect would it have on a vital operation? Further research is required to give us that answer.
At least 1,500 soldiers were given LSD without informed consent as part of Army mind control experiments. These facts have never been subject to ethical review or any policy or position statement by any medical organization. Frank Olson was a Fort Detrick biological warfare expert who committed suicide in 1953 after being given LSD hidden in liquor by Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, director of MK Ultra. Olson's family determined that he had committed suicide subsequent to a bad LSD trip only after reading Nelson Rockefeller's 1975 report on the CIA, published 22 years after Olson's death. They were given $750,000 in compensation by Congress. Biological warfare and chemical warfare research involved testing in many locations. Chemical warfare research involved releasing bacteria and viruses into general population areas. The bacterium Serratia mariscens was released in New York June 1966, San Francisco September 1950, and Pennsylvania January 1955. A paper in the Archives of Internal Medicine describes 11 Serratia mariscens infections seen in one San Francisco hospital between September 1950 and February 1951. The paper was published because Serratia mariscens infections are very rare. MK Ultra Subproject 35 involved funding the construction of the Gorman Annex at Georgetown University Hospital in Washington, D.C. The total budget for the annex of $1.25 million was to provide a hospital safe house for mind control research. 1/6 of the space was set aside for the CIA, which placed 3 biochemists there undercover. Another group of sub-projects consists of experiments and research on non-chemical mind control. This group of sub-projects is about 1/4 of the total MK Ultra sub-projects. It involves most of the contractors with unwitting status. Unwitting contractors are ones who do not realize that the research money is from the CIA because it has been funneled through a cutout or front organization. By and large, the psychologists and sociologists were unwitting contractors, while the physicians, chemists, and the biologists had top-secret clearance and were aware that they were working for the CIA. In CIA terminology, these people were witting. Like the Tuskegee syphilis study and the radiation research, MK Ultra involved direct experimentation on children without informed consent being given by their parents or guardians.
Between the years of 1957 and 1984, I became a pawn in a government scheme whose ultimate goal was mind control and to create the perfect spy, all through the use of chemicals, radiation, drugs, hypnosis, electric shock, isolation in tubs of water, sleep deprivation, brainwashing, verbal, physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. I was exploited unwittingly for nearly 3 decades of my life, and the only explanations given to me were that, quote, the end justifies the means, and, quote, I was serving my country in their bold effort to fight communism. I can only summarize my circumstances by saying they took an already abused 7-year-old child and compounded my suffering beyond belief. The saddest part is, I know for a fact that I was not alone. There were countless other children in my same situation, and there was no one to help us. Until now. I've already submitted as much information as possible, including conversations overheard of the people, agencies responsible. I'm able to report all this to you in such detail because of my photographic memory and the arrogance of the doctors, the arrogance of the people involved. They were certain they would always control my mind. Although the process of recalling these atrocities is not an easy one, nor is it without some danger to myself and my family, I feel the risk is worth taking. Dr. L. Wilson Green, who claimed to have received $50 million from the Edgewood Chemical and Radiology Laboratory as part of the TSD, or Technical Science Division of the CIA, once described to Dr. Charles Brown that, quote, children were used as subjects because they were more fun to work with and cheaper, too. They needed lower profile subjects than soldiers or government people, so only young, willing females would do. Besides, he said, I like scaring them. They in the agency think I'm a god, creating subjects and experiments for whatever deviant purposes Sid and James can think up. Sid being Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, James, Dr. James Hamilton. In 1958, I was to be tested, they told me, by some important doctors from the society, or the Human Ecology Society, and I was instructed to cooperate. I was told not to look at anyone's faces and try hard not to ignore any names.
If you're watching
as this was
this
a
and you're
very
able to get
secret
this, you're
project.
very lucky to save, share.
But I was told to be brave, and all these things would help me forget. Naturally, as most children do, I did the opposite and remembered as much as I could. Dr. John Gittinger tested me, Dr. Cameron gave me the shocks, and Dr. Green the x-rays.
They were doing this, how long ago is this? What do you think they're doing now?
The big A, or meaning artichoke. By the time I left to go home, just like every time from then on,
It's all been proven.
I would remember only whatever explanations Dr. Robert G. Heath at Tulane Medical University gave me for the odd bruises, needle marks, burns on my head, fingers, and even the genital soreness. I had no reason to believe otherwise. They had already begun to control my mind. The next year, I was sent to a lodge in Maryland called Deep Creek Cabins to learn how to sexually please men. I was taught how to coerce them into talking about themselves, and it was Richard Helms, who was deputy director of the CIA, Dr. Gottlieb, Captain George White, Morris Allen, who all planned on filming as many high government agency officials and heads of academic institutions and foundations as possible,
They never
so that
stopped
later
doing
when
this
the
stuff.
funding for mind control and radiation started to dwindle, projects would continue. I was used to entrap many unwitting men, including themselves, all with the use of a hidden camera. I was only 9 years old when this sexual humiliation began.
Oh my God, what?
I overheard conversations about
9?
a part of the agency called ORD,
How could
which
you
I found out was Office of
do that
Research
to
and
a
Development.
9-year-old?
It was run by Dr. Green, Dr. Stephen Aldrich, Martin Orne, and Morris Allen. Once a crude remark was made by Dr. Gottlieb about a certain possible leak over New Orleans East involving a large group of retarded children who are being given massive doses of radiation. He asked, why was Wilson so worried about a few retarded kids? After all, they would be the least likely to spill the beans. Another time, I heard Dr. Martin Orne, who was the director then of the scientific office and later the head of the Institute for Experimental Research, state that, quote, in order to keep more funding coming from different sources for radiation and mind control projects, he suggested stepping up the amounts of stressors used and also the blackmail portion of the experiments. He said it needed to be done faster than to get rid of the subjects, or they were asking for us to come back later and haunt them with our remembrances. There's much more I could tell you about government-sponsored research, including project names, sub-project numbers, people involved, facilities used, tests, and other forms of pain induction. But I think I've given more than enough information to recommend further investigation of all the mind control projects, especially as they involve so much use of the radiation. I would love nothing more than to say that I dreamed all this up and need just to forget it. But that would be a tragic mistake. It would also be a lie. All these atrocities did occur to me and to countless other children, and all under the guise of defending our country. It is because of the cumulative effects of exposure to radiation, chemicals, drugs, pain, and subsequent mental and physical distress that I've been robbed of the ability to work and even to bear any children of my own. It is blatantly obvious that none of this was needed, nor should it ever have been allowed to take place at all. And the only means we have to seek out the awful truth and bring it to light is by opening whatever files remain on all the projects and through another presidential commission on mind control. I believe that every citizen of this nation has the right to know just what is fact and what is fiction.
No, that's why they go Kennedy.
It is our greatest
They do the
protection
same
against
thing.
the possibility of this ever happening again. In conclusion, I can offer you no more than what I've given you today, the truth. And I thank you for your time.
Crazy.